What's up everybody, LUI here, salute you wherever you are, and this is a quite interesting news from down under, from Australia. Lee Priest supposedly said the following: Mr. Olympia will be done after this year. Classic physique will surpass open bodybuilding. So supposedly he said this merely a few days ago, actually, in this month of July. It is by fitnessvault.com. So the proper phrase or sentence supposedly is the following: out on a limb here, but I think the Mr. Olympia will be done after this year. The men's open will probably be gone, like the women's bodybuilding for that matter, and more will be put on the classic physiques and the other divisions to make the sport more mainstream. Quite interesting. To put you in context, merely I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, the girlfriend of the reigning Mr. Olympia, Phil Heath, posted some sort of a controversial post on her social media where she said that there's only one real Mr. Olympia, the one that holds the Sandow, meaning the open men's bodybuilding, because the rest, like Jeremy Bondia, although he's, Mr. Olympia of physique, he receives a medal. Same goes for the classic physique winner. For that matter, Mr. Breon Ansley receives a medal, a golden one, well, not real gold, but gold D, to say the least, but not the Sandow. But this is a full-on bodybuilder, not anyone, probably the most outspoken of them all. His nickname is the Blonde Myth, right? And it's not new. Lee Priest, if you guys recall back in the day, he was the only guy who dared to do this, right? An open interview about the consumption of supplements, of course, in bodybuilding. You can recognize the other guy next to him is Tom Platz, right? The Quadzilla, the original one, and he was also some sort of a blonde myth, but from America this time around. This was in the early 90s. This was in Dorian Yates' era, right? And in this interview, all the rest of the interviewees were hidden somehow. We can recognize them pretty much. If you know bodybuilders, you would recognize them all. And I think even Ronnie Coleman was there back then, and he was not Mr. Olympia as of yet, since he was pretty much placed in not even top 6 in the Dorian Yates era. But this probably was, in my opinion, one of the reasons why Lee Priest was always dinged by establishment, because he was outspoken. How dare he make an interview, without hiding his face, talking about some things that are not saluted, in a sense. He was also recognized at, he was pretty much one of the very first freaks. He was a freak, I think, right before Dorian Yates, in a sense. He was a freak next to, Paul Dillette, right? And then he said, hey, welcome to Dorian Yates, right? This was one of the most famous period of his time. He was an athlete of ProLab. ProLab was very famous back then. I do recall buying my first creatine was made by ProLab, and he was pretty much the image of ProLab. This is a peculiar picture of him back in the day, quite famous when he was bulking. This was a proper quote unquote dirty bulk, and then he came in with this mass. He was really massive. If I do recall, in Mr. Olympia, I think it was back in 95 or 96, they gave they gave a new not title, but they gave a prize to the most muscular guy on stage, and it was won by Nasser El Sambati, right? Because you guys do not like me when I say El Sambati. Hell, that name is Arabic, so I can say it properly in Arabic. A Sambati. Try to emulate that. Anyway, they gave it to Nasser, but a lot of people protested. They say, hey, Nasser was not the guy who had the most muscle ratio on stage. The most muscle ratio, frankly, was Lee Priest. He was holding the most muscle on that stage by ratio, by height, right? And even more impressive than that of Dorian Yates, and of course that of Nasser Al-Sambari. Nasser was just the heaviest. But that's that. So is it true that he says that? Now, you guys know my opinion on this, right? I said like 2 years ago or so that bodybuilding is slowing tremendously. They cannot even hide it. Lately, they're coming out with some new rules supposedly allowing the fans to have their say. Although that rule would have absolutely no weight, because the final say will always go to the judges. I think it's just a trial in a sense, try to revive it, right? Do I agree with him? To a certain extent, yes. But will it be next year? No. Quite frankly, I do not think that bodybuilding will die next year or not even in 2 years. But it is slowing down tremendously. Tremendously. I'm not gonna mention names, but yeah, you guys know me. I was pretty much close to the who's who in bodybuilding, and you know, like the top dog was telling me, hey, what will they do after I'm gone? You know, so that's that. Yeah, it will slow down, and it will become rather closed niche in a sense. There will always be a market, but very small, for the big fauna, for the freaks. However, I agree with him. One Classic Physique will definitely take over. It will be the sweet spot, and people will like it. It's like a Porsche GTS. It's not overdone like a G22 RS. You can dream about it. It's a hypercar, but you cannot daily drive it. It is too extreme, too compromised. You cannot take it to the mall, right? Just buy yourself a regular 911 Carrera S or GTS, and it will be just proper, especially for today's era. Bodybuilding has become overdone, too extreme, and this is coming from a guy who was literally, as I told you, a freak in his own right in his era. I mean, look at the pictures of Pro Lab back in the day. The ratio, this is not Photoshop. He was just massive. He was holding a proper amount of size in that small, short frame. Highly underrated because of pretty much politics. This guy was one of the most dinged guys when it comes to politics. It happened actually in 2000 and was it 2002? Yes, 2002. If I do recall my memory, they gave him number 5 in Miss Olympia, or number 6, right? Either him or Schlierkamp. Both him and Schlierkamp, they received number 5 and 6. And it was just by politics. That Olympia was won by Ronnie Coleman, and quite frankly, he did not deserve it in 2002. He was off. Schlierkamp should have won that. Can you imagine? And Schlierkamp they put him in number 5 or 6. I made a video about it. But that's that. It tells you how politics was there since pretty much ever, and this guy was definitely a victim of it because of several things. He was a loudmouth. He was outspoken, even more so than Sean Ray. And obviously, he's no friend with Sean Ray for good reason. But yeah, look at him. He was the only guy doing this interview back then. All the others, you can see them, they're hiding their face, right? This guy, I don't know who's who. This is, let me show you, where's that guy? There we go. See? And then there is this guy right here. Totally. They're all hiding their faces except him. Right? I don't know them all. These guys, you can all recognize them if you follow bodybuilding. He was the only guy basically showing his face and talking openly about all the consumption back then. Can you imagine? I mean, Tom Platz was not even natural in his era. He was in the early 80s, but he was literally, may I say, probably surprised or literally shocked by the consumption which happened immediately a decade after his era. This guy was in the early 80s, and he was making this interview in the early 90s. Imagine, literally right now, almost like 25 years later. So totally different ball game. It is what is hindering bodybuilding. They can save it if they can, but I think they're disconnected. The establishment is disconnected totally with the present. They can just bring it back and forget about establishing rules of vacuum or this and that. You know, that what the guy, what's his name? Not Ashkinani, the other guy, actually, I forgot his name. He's from Persia. He can do a vacuum, but when he turns, he has a bubble gut still, right? So it's not the way to fix it. Just bring more aesthetic rules. Aesthetic is aesthetic, right? It's a proper metric. It's an undeniable visual effect from all sides, either relaxed or not. Remove the nonsensical. If it's not a mandatory pose, it doesn't count. Come on. I mean, there are transitions. There is classic posing. Just bring back the era. And by the way, when this interview was done, they did not interview Francis Benfato. He was in this era. He was exactly in 1990, 1991. He was there. but he was dinged because he was classical and he was merely weighing 170. So that's that, guys. Tell me what you think about it. Do you agree with Lee Priest, who supposedly says that Mr. Olympia will be done after this year and it will be replaced totally by Classic Physique? Have a nice one.